The massive council chamber floated in the void between stars, a testament to the Galactic Alliance's power. For 10,000 years, this station had been the seat of ultimate authority, where 5 ancient races decided the fate of younger civilizations. Admiral John Blake stood on the bridge of humanity's newest warship, the U.S. Thunder. His crew watched the viewscreen as they approached the station. Earth had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago, making them infants by galactic standards. The invitation to the council had come as a shock. "Sir, they're hailing us," Lieutenant Amy Ross reported from communications. Her voice carried a hint of nervousness that matched what everyone felt. "Put them through," Blake ordered, straightening his uniform. The screen filled with the image of Supreme Commander Vox, leader of the Dominion forces. His species, the Krell, had ruled the military aspects of the Alliance for millennia. Their gray skin and 4 arms made them look intimidating, which they used to full effect. "Human vessel," Vox spoke with clear disdain. "You will dock at the inferior species port." Section 9. Blake's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. "Acknowledged." The Thunder moved toward the designated docking area, passing the magnificent ships of the elder races. The Zelton dreadnoughts gleamed with energy shields that had never been breached. The Morvik cruisers displayed weapons that could crack moons. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering that had been refined over thousands of years. In comparison, the Thunder looked almost primitive. Its hull was thick metal plating instead of energy barriers. Its weapons were hidden behind closed ports rather than displayed proudly. To the watching aliens, it must have seemed like a child's toy among real warships. Inside the station, Blake and his senior staff walked through corridors filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds. Most ignored the humans completely. Others watched with amusement or pity. Earth was known as a backwater planet that had barely survived its own nuclear age. Council chamber itself was overwhelming. 5 massive thrones rose above a central floor where petitioners stood. Each throne held one of the ancient 5, the races that had shaped galactic civilization before humanity had even discovered fire. Humans of Earth, the central figure spoke. This was Overlord Kex of the Zelton Empire. "You have been summoned to witness the judgment of the rebel sectors. 3 systems have refused to pay tribute to the Alliance. Watch and learn what happens to those who defy order." A holographic display showed 3 inhabited planets. Blake recognized them as recent colonies that had been struggling under heavy taxation from the Alliance. Their crime had been asking for more time to pay. The sentence is planetary bombardment. "Their cities will be destroyed as an example," Kex announced coldly. Blake stepped forward before he could stop himself. "That's millions of innocent lives." The chamber fell silent. No one interrupted the Ancient 5. Vox laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the room. "A primitive speaks. Tell me, human, what would your species do? Your history is soaked in blood. You have no right to judge." "We've learned from our mistakes," Blake replied firmly. "That's what makes us strong." "Strong?" Another of the 5, Master Gorn of the Morvek Confederation, leaned forward. "Your ships are metal coffins. Your weapons are chemical projectiles. You have no shields, no plasma cannons, no antimatter cores. You dare speak of strength?" The mockery spread through the chamber. Representatives laughed openly at humanity's defender. Blake stood straighter. "Strength isn't just about technology." "Then prove it," Kex challenged. "If your species is so strong, stop our fleet. 1 human ship against a punishment squadron. If you win, the colonies go free. When you lose, Earth pays double tribute for your arrogance." The trap was obvious. They wanted to humiliate humanity, to make an example of them just like the colonies. But Blake saw something in their arrogance that they didn't. They had never faced someone with nothing to lose and everything to prove. "We accept," Blake said simply. The laughter stopped. They hadn't expected that, Dot, as Blake turned to leave. He heard Vox whisper to another commander, "Ready the funeral procedures for the human crew." "This will be over in minutes." Blake smiled grimly. They were about to learn why humanity had survived when so many said they wouldn't. Asterisk. Captain Tom Wilson studied the tactical display in the Thunder's war room. 20 ships formed the Alliance Punishment Squadron, each one supposedly superior to anything Earth had ever built. His officers gathered around the holographic projection, their faces grim but determined. "Their formation is Standard Alliance Protocol 7, Commander Lisa Park observed, pointing at the arrangement. The heavy cruisers in front, destroyers on the flanks, and the command ship protected in the center. They're not even trying to hide their positions." Weapons Officer Mike Jones added, "They think this is going to be easy." Wilson nodded slowly. The aliens' arrogance would be their downfall. While they had been perfecting the same tactics for thousands of years, humanity had been forced to innovate constantly just to survive. "What do we know about their shields?" Wilson asked. "Energy-based, frequency modulated," Chief Engineer Bob Smith replied. "They cycle through predetermined patterns. Very efficient against energy weapons and plasma, but not against kinetic impacts. They've never needed to defend against them. No civilized race uses projectiles anymore." Wilson smiled. Sometimes being primitive had advantages. On the bridge, Admiral Blake watched the countdown timer. They had 1 hour before the engagement began. The Alliance had even given them time to prepare their final messages. Another insult, disguised as courtesy. "All stations report ready." "Admiral," Ross announced. "Good. Execute Operation Slingshot." The Thunder began moving, but not toward the enemy fleet. Instead, it accelerated toward the nearby asteroid field. The watching alien vessels probably thought the humans were trying to hide Dot in the council chamber. The Ancient Five watched with amusement. "They run already?" Vox laughed. "I expected them to at least pretend to fight. Perhaps they seek cover in the asteroids," suggested another commander. "Cover from what?" "Our sensors can track them anywhere. Our weapons can vaporize those rocks." But Blake wasn't looking for cover. The Thunder's crew was busy with calculations that would have seemed insane to the Alliance. They were mapping gravitational fields, plotting trajectories, turning the asteroid field into something else entirely. "Magnetic rails deployed," Jones reported. "Capacitors charging." The Thunder had stopped between 2 large asteroids. To the aliens, it must have looked like they were cowering. They couldn't see the electromagnetic fields building between the ship and the rocks. They couldn't detect the subtle changes in trajectory as smaller asteroids were guided into position. "Sir, they're broadcasting," Ross said. "They're laughing at us. They want to know if we're ready to surrender." "Let them laugh," Blake replied. "How many rocks do we have?" 3,000, sir. Various sizes from pebbles to boulders. Each piece of space debris had been carefully selected and positioned. The Thunder's secret wasn't advanced shields or exotic weapons. It was something much simpler and much more dangerous. Human creativity applied to basic physics. The Alliance fleet began moving forward, maintaining their perfect formation. They expected the Thunder to emerge from the asteroids, either fleeing or charging. They were prepared for both. They weren't prepared for what actually happened. "Fire," Blake ordered quietly. The Thunder's mass drivers activated. Not the small ones visible on the hull. Those were decoys. The real weapons were built into the ship's spine, running almost its entire length. Magnetic fields accelerated the first wave of asteroids to 20% the speed of light dot in space. There's no air resistance to slow things down. A pebble becomes a bullet. A rock becomes a cannonball. A boulder becomes a city killer. The Alliance fleet's shields flickered as the first impacts hit. The energy barriers, designed to disperse laser fire and absorb plasma bolts, couldn't handle solid matter hitting at relativistic speeds. The smaller pieces punched through, leaving perfect holes. The larger ones hit like nuclear bombs. Impossible. Vox screamed over the communications. Primitives throwing rocks. But these weren't just thrown rocks. Each trajectory had been calculated to use the gravitational fields of nearby celestial bodies. The asteroids curved and twisted, coming from angles the Alliance computers couldn't predict because they were programmed for energy weapons that traveled in straight lines. Destroyers exploded in the first volley. 2 cruisers lost their engines. The command ship's shields collapsed entirely, leaving it vulnerable. "Second wave ready," Jones announced. "Hold," Blake ordered. "Give them a chance to surrender." The Alliance fleet was in chaos. Their perfect formation had shattered. Ships collided trying to avoid the asteroid streams. Their return fire went wild, energy beams shooting harmlessly into space because they couldn't target what was essentially a cloud of death moving at speeds there. Systems weren't designed to track DOT in thousands of years of warfare. They had never faced this. They had shields for everything except the one thing humanity had been throwing at each other since the dawn of time: rocks. Asterisk. Commander Vox stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Half his squadron was either destroyed or crippled, and the human ship hadn't even moved from its position. The pride of the Alliance Navy was being torn apart by accelerated debris. "Adapt the shield frequencies." He roared at his crew. "We're trying, Commander, but the impacts are physical. The shields aren't designed. I don't want excuses." On the Thunder, Admiral Blake watched the Alliance's attempts to respond. Their energy weapons were firing blindly now, trying to vaporize the incoming asteroids. Some they hit, but turning a large rock into many small rocks, traveling at the same speed, only made the problem worse. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Council," Ross reported. "Put it through." Overlord Kex appeared on the screen. His composure cracked for the first time in millennia. "This is barbaric. You're using gravity itself as a weapon." "It's not barbaric," Blake replied calmly. "It's practical. You've forgotten what that means. Cease this attack immediately." "Will you spare the colonies?" There was a long pause. Pride warred with survival in the Overlord's expression. Meanwhile, the Thunder's crew was preparing their next surprise. The Alliance thought human technology was primitive because they still used chemical rockets and metal armor. They hadn't considered that humanity had perfected these primitive technologies to an art form. "Deploy the Hornets." Wilson ordered DOT from the Thunder's hull. Hundreds of small drones launched. Each one was barely larger than a basketball, painted black to blend with space. They had no shields, no energy weapons, nothing that Alliance sensors were designed to detect. What they did have were small chemical thrusters and very simple computer brains programmed with one instruction: ram dot the drones spread out in a vast cloud, accelerating toward the enemy fleet. To the Alliance sensors, calibrated for energy signatures and shield emissions, they were almost invisible. Just more debris among the chaos. The first Alliance captain to understand what was happening tried to warn the others, but it was too late. The drones attached themselves to hull breaches, sensor arrays, and engine ports. Then they detonated their small but precisely placed charges. On the Council station, representatives from hundreds of worlds watched in stunned silence. The mighty Alliance fleet, which had never lost a battle in recorded history, was being systematically dismantled by a single Azuli. Earthship using tactics that seemed almost insultingly simple. "They're not even fighting properly," one representative whispered. "Where are their energy beams? Their plasma cannons?" Master Gorn of the Morvok had been silent until now, studying the battle with growing respect. "They're not fighting by our rules," he said slowly. "They're fighting by their own." This was the secret the Alliance had missed. While they had spent millennia perfecting energy weapons and shields, humanity had spent its entire history finding creative ways to destroy things with whatever was available. They had turned warfare into a science of efficiency, not spectacle. Commander Vox is requesting permission to retreat, an aide reported to the Council. Retreat. The word had never been spoken in these chambers before. The Alliance didn't retreat. They conquered or they negotiated, but they never ran. Denied, Kex said, though his voice lacked its usual authority. He must fight to victory or destruction. But Vox was no fool. He could see what the Council couldn't. This wasn't about technology levels or ship classifications. The humans had changed the entire paradigm of space combat in a single engagement. While the Alliance had been playing chess with the same pieces for millennia, humanity had just introduced a completely different game. The Thunder finally moved from its position, accelerating toward the scattered Alliance fleet. As it moved, it launched one more surprise: boarding pods. The Alliance had never needed to develop anti-boarding protocols because energy shields prevented such primitive tactics. But with their shields failing and their formations broken, they were vulnerable. Human Marines in powered armor began taking Alliance ships from the inside, using projectile weapons and explosives that seemed almost quaint by galactic standards, but were devastatingly effective in close quarters. Within an hour, it was over. The punishment squadron was either destroyed, disabled, or captured. The Thunder floated among the wreckage, scarred but intact. A single human ship had defeated a force that should have been able to destroy Earth's entire fleet. In the Council chamber, Overlord Kex stood from his throne for the first time in centuries. "The colonies are spared," he announced, his voice carrying across the station. "The humans have proven their point." But everyone knew this was bigger than just one battle. The illusion of the Alliance's supremacy had been shattered, and it could never be fully rebuilt. The aftermath of the battle sent shockwaves through the Galactic Alliance. Emergency sessions were called. Ancient treaties were reviewed. The 5 elder races huddled in private councils, trying to understand how everything had changed so quickly. Admiral Blake stood once again in the Council chamber, but this time no one laughed. The representatives watched him with a mixture of fear, respect, and confusion. The human who had been dismissed as primitive just days ago had become the most dangerous person in the room. "You used gravity as a weapon," Overlord Kex said, his voice carefully neutral. "You turned space debris into projectiles. These are not the tactics of an advanced civilization." "No," Blake agreed. "They're the tactics of survivors." Master Gorn leaned forward. "Explain. You've had 10,000 years of peace among yourselves," Blake began. "Your wars are formal, ritualized. You fight by rules everyone agrees to. But humans? We've never had that luxury. We've had to fight for survival against each other, against nature, against everything. We learned to use whatever we had, but surely now that you've reached the stars..." Another council member started. "Now we have bigger rocks to throw," Blake interrupted. "You perfect your technology. We perfect winning." The truth was beginning to dawn on the Alliance. They had assumed technological superiority meant military superiority. But humans had proven that creativity and desperation could overcome any technological gap. Chief Engineer Smith had been analyzing captured Alliance technology and made a discovery that would change everything. He contacted Blake directly during the council session. "Admiral, you need to see this." Smith's voice came through Blake's earpiece. "Their shield technology, it has a fundamental flaw." "Later, Chief." "No, sir. No, it's not just a flaw. It's intentional." Blake excused himself from the chamber, leaving his diplomatic team to continue negotiations. In a secure room, Smith showed him the data. "Every Alliance shield system has the same base frequency pattern," Smith explained. "Hidden under layers of modification, but it's there. And there's more. It's designed to fail under specific conditions." "What conditions?" "A signal. A command code. Someone can turn off every shield in the Alliance fleet with one transmission. Blake felt cold. Who has this code? That's the thing, Admiral. The code signature points to a sixth race. Someone older than even the Ancient Five. The implications were staggering. The entire Galactic Alliance, its power structure, its military might, it was all built on technology with a hidden back door. Someone had been playing a game measured in millennia, and everyone else had been pawns. Blake returned to the council chamber with this knowledge, debating whether to reveal it. The Ancient Five were still discussing humanity's fate, unaware that their entire civilization rested on a foundation of lies. We propose humanity be granted provisional membership in the Alliance, Overlord Kex was saying. With restrictions, of course. No, Blake said simply. The chamber fell silent again. You refuse membership? Kex sounded genuinely surprised. We refuse restrictions. If Earth joins, we join as equals. Impossible. You're millennia behind us in development. Blake made his decision. Your shields. They all share a base frequency pattern. The technical representatives in the chamber immediately began checking their systems. The murmur of voices grew to a roar as they confirmed what Blake was saying. How did you discover this? Master Gorn demanded. We took things apart to see how they worked. Another primitive human trait. Blake pulled out a datapad. This is the command code that can disable every shield in your fleet. He transmitted it to the main display. The Ancient Five recoiled as if struck. This is impossible, Kex whispered. Our technology is perfect. It has been refined over 10,000 years of guidance by someone else, Blake finished. Someone who wanted you dependent on technology. They could. Control. The revelation shattered more than just military doctrine. It called into question the entire history of the Alliance. Who had been manipulating them? Why? And most terrifyingly, were they still watching? Earth offers a different path, Blake continued. Technology that can't be remotely disabled. Tactics that don't depend on energy shields. We're not more advanced than you. We're differently advanced. And right now, that difference might be the only thing that saves us all from whoever's been pulling your strings. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives demanded answers, explanations. Accusations flew between the Ancient Five. Perfect order of the Alliance crumbled in minutes. And somewhere in the void between galaxies, ancient systems registered that the game had finally become interesting. Asterisk. 6 months had passed since the Thunder's victory. The galaxy looked very different now. The revelation about the shield backdoor had triggered a complete restructuring of the Alliance. Some races abandoned energy shields entirely, trying to develop alternatives. Others dove deep into their histories, searching for clues about their mysterious manipulator. Admiral Blake stood on the bridge of humanity's new flagship, the UES Phoenix. Unlike the Thunder, this ship was a hybrid human innovation combined with alien technology, but technology they understood and controlled completely. Admiral, we're receiving a priority message from Earth, Lieutenant Ross announced. She had been promoted after the historic battle. It's from the President. Put it through to my ready room. The President's face appeared on the screen, looking tired but determined. John, we've detected something. Deep space monitors picked up a massive energy signature moving toward Alliance space. It's not using any known FTL method. Blake studied the data. The object was huge, larger than any ship ever built. And it was old. The energy patterns suggested technology that predated even the Ancient Five. How long until it arrives? At current speed, 6 days. 6 days to prepare for something that had been controlling galactic civilization for millennia. Blake immediately called an emergency meeting of what they now called the New Alliance. A partnership based on equality rather than hierarchy. In the council chamber, now redesigned with seats of equal height, Representatives from Earth worked alongside the former Ancient Five. The old arrogance had been replaced with cautious respect. "It's them," Overlord Keck said simply when he saw the data. "The architects. They're coming to restore order. You know who they are?" Blake asked. "Legends, stories. They supposedly guided our ancestors to the stars, gave us the technology that became the foundation of everything." Kex's expression was grim. "If the legends are true, they're millions of years old," Master Gorn added. "Every race has similar stories. Beings of light who gave us tools, but told us never to question, never to dig too deep. And we just broke their biggest rule," Blake said. "We exposed their control system. The next days were a frantic rush of preparation. Human engineers worked with alien scientists, combining their different approaches. The Thunder's success had taught everyone a valuable lesson. Diversity of thought was more powerful than uniformity of technology. Captain Wilson, now commanding a mixed fleet, proposed something radical. "We can't match their technology, but maybe we don't have to." The Thunder won by changing the rules. "Let's do it again." The plan was insane by Alliance standards, but perfectly human in its audacity. Instead of meeting the architects with shields and weapons, they would meet them with something else entirely: questions. When the architect ship arrived, it was beyond impressive. A crystalline structure the size of a moon, pulsing with energies that sensors couldn't properly classify. It broadcast a single message: "Submit to restoration." Blake responded from the Phoenix. "We decline, but we're willing to talk." For the first time in millions of years, someone had said no to the architects. The being that appeared on screen was barely comprehensible, a shifting pattern of light and thought that hurt to look at directly. "You are chaos. You must be ordered." "Why?" Blake asked simply. The question seemed to confuse the entity. "Order is perfection. Chaos is destruction. Chaos is also creation," Blake replied. "Every innovation, every breakthrough, every evolution comes from chaos. You've kept the galaxy in stasis for millions of years. No growth, no real progress, just refinement of the same old patterns." The human fleet had spread out, not in a combat formation, but in something else, a demonstration. Each ship began doing something different. One painted a picture using engine exhaust. Another played music across all frequencies. A third performed complex maneuvers that served no purpose except beauty. "This is what chaos creates," Blake continued. "Art, music, innovation, things that don't fit into perfect order but make existence worth living." The architect was silent for a long moment. Then something unprecedented happened. It laughed. A sound like stellar wind chimes that resonated through every ship. "In 10 million years," it said, "no one has ever simply asked why. They accepted order because we were stronger. You accept chaos because you are willing to be weaker to be free." "We're not weaker," Blake corrected. "We're different. And difference is strength." The crystalline ship began to change, its perfect geometric patterns becoming more fluid, more chaotic. Perhaps it is time for us to learn something new." And so the galaxy entered a new age, not of order or chaos, but of balance. The architects became observers rather than controllers, curious to see what these chaotic humans would create. Earth's warship hadn't just destroyed the illusion of galactic supremacy. It had given birth to something far more valuable: possibility. Asterisk.